Hello, this is the Death Row and Executions channel. My name is Paco. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more Death Row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. Also, check out my other channel here on YouTube called The Maximum Sentence, where I cover recent crimes and convictions. There will be a link for that as well. I find it hard to believe that I'm going to talk about yet another convenience store worker that was murdered. In this case, the victim was kidnapped from the gas station and killed somewhere else. But I've had several of these convenience store tragedies already this year. The state of Utah had not executed anyone in 14 years since the year 2010. And then last year, in 2024, the state of Utah executed Tabaron Honey shortly after midnight on August the 8th. This year, they have one execution scheduled, 67-year-old Ralph Leroy Menzies on September the 5th. Menzies also happens to be the longest-serving inmate on death row in Utah. He's been there 37 years. He was sentenced to death in 1988, almost 2 years after committing the crime in 1986. Ralph Menzies was born and raised in Utah, born in 1958. He has a rap sheet going back to his teenage years. When he was 20 years old, he was serving time in prison when he and another inmate escaped. This was 1978, about 8 years before committing the murder that got him sentenced to death. A week after escaping, Menzies robbed and shot a taxi cab driver. The cab driver survived, but he was captured and charged. But the trial ended with a hung jury because jurors couldn't agree on what to convict him with. And the case was never retried. So he did get 5 years for a robbery charge and was sentenced to 1 to 15 years for that prison escape. This was now 1979. Menzies was released on parole in 1984, and a year later, in 1985, he was arrested again for robbery, but was allowed to bail himself out of jail and remain free until his sentencing hearing, which was scheduled for March of the year 1986. But that sentencing hearing, or what to sentence him with, would never happen because a month before that, he entered a convenience store at a gas station and then kidnapped and killed the woman who was working at that convenience store. That murder happened 3 days after he was released on bail. Maurine Hunsaker was married to a man named Michael Jim Hunsaker, and they had 3 children, ages 10, 15 months, and 6 months. Here she is seen with one of her boys. And here is that boy now. Maurine worked as a convenience store clerk at the Gasomat station in Kearns, Utah. If I'm not mistaken, Gasomat stations no longer exist, or there are just 1 or 2 around since filing for bankruptcy in 2015. Maurine's husband, Jim, in the 1980s or early 90s, had filed a lawsuit against the company, holding them responsible for the death of his wife and mother of his 3 children. He also sued the state of Utah for failing to supervise the parole of Ralph Menzies while he was out on bail. I didn't really delve into what were the outcomes of those lawsuits. In the city of Kearns, just outside Salt Lake City, Utah, on February 23rd, 1986, a Sunday, Maurine had been working at the Gasomat station late into the evening. That whole area looks very different now than it did in 1986. Late that night, as we have seen way too many times before, a man enters the convenience store to rob the place of cash. That man was on parole for other crimes. His name is Ralph Leroy Menzies. What we know from the reports is that Ralph Menzies got $116 out of the cash register. According to Maurine's husband, Jim Hunsaker, he tried calling Maurine that night, but she did not answer the phone. So he was worried and went over to the gas station, arriving there about 10 o'clock that night. He noticed that she and her purse was missing. Jim then called police. They arrived at the convenience store to investigate and then escorted Jim back home. And then something strange happened. Maurine called him at about 11 o'clock that night. Yeah, as it turns out, Ralph Menzies allowed her to make a phone call to her husband. Seems kind of risky on his part, but he did. Maurine told her husband Jim that she was being robbed and held hostage, but that the man said that he will release her soon. Now, cell phones were extremely rare in 1986, so where Maurine made that call from is also not clear. But she did call him. What we would later learn is that Ralph Menzies, using a car that he borrowed from a friend, had driven Maurine 16 miles from the gas station in Kearns to a picnic area in the Storm Mountain area of Big Cottonwood Canyon and parked the car in the parking lot. There were two teenagers hanging out in the area, Tim Larrabee and Beth Brown, hanging out late that night, that saw the car Menzies was driving. And they saw Menzies and Maurine get out of the car and walk off into another area of the grounds. Menzies then violated Maurine, and he strangled her as he was doing that. He then tied her to a tree and slashed her throat with a knife, killing her. And then he drove away. By the following day, a Monday, Maurine was declared a missing person. Her husband Jim and police were all searching for her. Meanwhile, that same Monday, now the 24th, Ralph Menzies was picked up and arrested, but not for the murder of Maurine. Nobody even knew that she was dead yet. He was arrested on pending warrants for burglary. And when Menzies was searched, they found on him a wallet belonging to Maurine Hunsaker with her ID, social security card, and some other items with her name on it. Police later searched Ralph Menzies' apartment and found Maurine's purse. On the following day, Tuesday, February 25th, a hiker at Big Cottonwood Canyon discovered the dead body of Maurine Hunsaker 3 days before Maurine's 27th birthday. When the two high school students that were hanging out in the Storm Mountain area learned of the incident after seeing it on the news on TV, they notified police that they were there on Sunday night when they saw that woman, Maurine, get out of a car with a man. Some reports have the teenagers witnessing the incident after midnight, so it is seen in the reports as Monday morning instead of Sunday night. The teenagers described to a T the man that they had seen and his car. Investigators would later learn from a man named Troy Denter that he had loaned Ralph Menzies his car that Sunday, and that car matched the description of the car provided by the two teenagers. Investigators already probably had enough evidence after finding a bunch of Maurine's personal belongings in his possession, but those eyewitness accounts surely solidified the case. Menzies went to trial in February of 1988, 2 years after the crime. After a trial that lasted 1 month, he was found guilty of kidnapping and murder, and on March 23rd, 1988, a judge sentenced Menzies to death. And he's been on death row ever since. This is scheduled to come to an end on September the 5th of this year. Please go ahead and hit the subscribe button for more of these death row and upcoming execution stories so that you're alerted when the next one comes out. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more death row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. My name is Paco Rivera. Thank you for watching. Take care and bye for now.